This is Professor McDonald. What I've decided to do is just kind of do a verbal introduction to practical exercise number 2. Obviously, this is voluntary. Somebody wants to listen to it or not listen to it. I fully explain the exercise in the written document which you download from Canvas. But let's just go through it real quick and just give you an understanding. The entire scenario itself is fictitious, just so you understand. This is something that I created in an effort to try to connect something that is more of a practical application of the concepts that you're learning in chapters 5 and 6, in particular chapter 6, which is analytical methods. So let's talk about this a little bit. The introduction document, Colombia's FARC attacks the U.S. homeland. The FARC is the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. That is actually a real terrorist organization, a Marxist organization. It's been in existence for many years, fighting the government in Colombia. They're basically a shell of themselves. They've actually entered into peace talks. This is background information to you. But this is a real organization that has existed in Colombia. So let's talk about the exercise. In this case study, I'm going to read some of this to you, but I'm going to add some additional comments as I go along, and I'll make this as brief as possible. In this case study, you are a member of a combined team of analysts from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and local and state law enforcement. While the threat posed in this case is fictitious, it mimics reality in which specific warning notices are rare and analysts are under tight time constraints, and they must work rapidly to direct collection assets and provide decision makers with timely, actionable analysis that can make the difference between averting a disaster or not. So what's the scenario? A series of major victories of the Colombian Army and its U.S. military supporters in Colombia against the FARC has created a new situation where the terrorist organization, the FARC, they see themselves substantially weakened, increasingly desperate and determined to demonstrate that it's not at a spent force. The FARC had threatened to retaliate against the United States in the past for interfering in the internal affairs of Colombia, and its leaders have concluded that the time has come. In this fictitious scenario, members of the FARC Secretariat, that would be the leadership team, those are UN categorization. So that's the leadership of the FARC. And top military commanders, that would be the military commanders that work under the leadership of this terrorist organization, they gather in the Amazon jungle to formulate a strategy for a retaliatory strike against the United States. The challenge for U.S. analysts is to forecast how an attack is most likely to be launched, and in doing so, how federal, state, local, and tribal officials prevent or mitigate the damage of such an attack. So the FARC have decided that they are going to carry out an attack in retaliation for the military actions that have been taken against them that have weakened the organization. Now, what I normally do in the lecture class is they have to go through this entire thing. They have to develop, they have to do brainstorming sessions, they have to develop drivers, structured scenarios, that sort of thing. I can't do that with this class. I think it would just be unfair because it would just be very complex. People would be confused. So I've tried to simplify this as best possible. And here's how I've done that. I've decided that in presenting this scenario to you, just about everything's been done. And so I'm presenting you just about every stage of the scenario as it would happen in the real world, how the analysts would handle this threat in the real world. And it only comes down to the final determination as to what you have to produce in this exercise. So, what's happened is your team, back to the scenario, has conducted a brainstorming session. They got together and exchanged ideas, a red hat analysis, thinking like the terrorists, identifies forces and factors. They talk about these in Chapter 6 in the textbook, which will influence the FARC's decision making. Themes that emerge, potential targets. Okay, these would be themes, these are things that would emerge based on these brainstorming sessions. Military target at the U.S. Southern Command in Miami, FBI and DA headquarters facilities in Washington, D.C., and a senior U.S. official who may be targeted for assassination. What are the type of weaponry that they feel could be used? This being the analysts are getting together and brainstorming these ideas and coming up with these themes. Rifles, small arms, weapon of mass destruction, spike the cocaine with poison, because the FARC provide security to the Colombian cartels in the jungles of Colombia. What would be the motivation? Direct military retaliation, desire to terrorize the U.S. population, create major economic damage to turn attention away from Colombia, or just pour revenge by assassinating a leader. So these are the drivers that will come up. Partners or seek assistance. They need outside assistance relative to designing and implementing the attack. They may need, let's say, for example, they were going to conduct a chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear attack. It's not going to be a nuclear attack because they don't have that capability, but they could do a chemical or biological attack. They could ask for assistance from specialists such as the IRA, for example, the Irish Republican Army, who are great bomb makers, known for that. Or drug networks within the U.S. that could provide assistance if they wanted to poison the drugs. Logistics, that's another driver. Funding for the operation. Infiltration of operatives into the U.S. Identify support networks with the U.S. Devise escape plans. These are the things that they're brainstorming, they're considering as they come up with these ideas. So based on the foregoing drivers that I talked about, targets, weapons, motives, partners or seek assistance, logistics, they have come up, they being the analyst on your team that you're working with, have come up with several. I've given, and we're only listing three through a multiple scenario generation exercise where we come up with potential, plausible, that means real, futures by conducting a multiple scenario generation exercise. They are listed below. So the team got together, looked at these drivers, and they brainstormed, they came up with ideas that they think these would be scenarios, multiple scenarios that they think possibly would be the way that the FARC would attack the United States. Okay? So they've done their job, partially. So they came up with these scenarios, which I'll go over here in a second. But there's one other step, and this is the step you have to work on. With these three scenarios, and this is what happens in the real world, the team would also have to come up with 5 milestones, we're also known as indicators, for each scenario to help the analyst identify which scenario is most likely coming true. So they come up with 3 scenarios. They're not sure which one of these is going to come true, maybe none of them. But if one of these does come true, how are they going to know that their forecast is correct? How are they going to know which one of these things is coming true, which one of these scenarios? And the only way to know that is to develop a list of indicators, also called milestones. Let's use the term milestones, okay, which would be observable events, okay, observable by law enforcement or the intelligence community or the public for the following scenario before the attack occurs. So what the analysts would actually in reality do is they would give law enforcement and the intelligence resources in the separate areas, geographical areas, they would give them the scenario that they've come up with, and they would give them a list of milestones that they should be looking out for. They would then pass these milestones out to the detectives, to the patrol officers, and see if any of the, other assets, intelligence people within the community, see if any of these things are coming true. If they start seeing where some of these things are showing up as coming true, then they know that they're probably onto the right scenario in how the FARC is going to attack the United States. And if you know how they're going to do it, you can then prevent it. That's the goal, is to prevent what's happening, okay? For example, and I've given an example here, if a city sees a sudden spike in gang violence and homicides, what does that mean? Well, those are indicators of something. they could be indicators of a scenario that a new gang has moved into the area. So let's say they're looking at these things and they would come up with a scenario, they would generate a scenario that a new gang has moved into the area, and say within a city. And indicators of that is if you see an increase in gang violence or increase in gang-related homicides. In the book, they also have a simplistic explanation. Let's say the intelligence analysts are forecasting that the economy is going to improve. Well, what would be a milestone of that would indicate that's coming true? The unemployment rate is dropping. So that would be one milestone or indicator that what they're forecasting is coming true. So that's what milestones do. And so in a terrorist scenario, this would be observable events by the public, by law enforcement, before the attack occurs. It's not, let's say, for example, an attack on a subway. It's not a milestone if the police call in and say, hey, somebody just detonated 6 bombs on the subway. Well, by that time, that's not before it happened. That's the actual attack. That is not a milestone or an indicator. That's the attack itself. What would happen before those bombs went off? What kind of activities could have happened where they would have been observable by law enforcement or other resources to show that that's what they were going to do? That's what a milestone is, okay? I can't make it any simpler than that. All right, so here's your scenarios real quick. Scenario 1, the FARC poisons cocaine and marijuana destined for the United States in Miami. Southern Command in Pensacola, the 7th Special Forces Group headquarters. 7th Special Forces is a Green Beret group that does work in Central and South America. Okay, they have been engaged with the FARC before. In an effort to terrorize those military communities and the U.S. population, sending a message not to fool with the FARC. So they're saying that that one of the possible scenarios is the FARC poisons cocaine and marijuana destined for the United States in Miami, in Pensacola. So what milestones or indicators could law enforcement and the population see that would indicate this is coming true? That's what you've got to come up with. 5 of those. Next one. FARC, with the logistic assistance of the IRA, bombs the metro in Washington, D.C. during rush hour to terrorize the U.S. population. What would you see? What is law enforcement? What are the intelligence community going to see? What information could be collected or developed before these bombs go off that would indicate this is what they're going to do? And the last, with the assistance of the IRA, FARC assassinates the Colombian ambassador to the United States while he's protected by Colombian military personnel in the U.S. State Department when visiting the UN in New York City. What things could occur in advance that would be observable by law enforcement, the intelligence community, or the public that would indicate that this is underway? This is what they're going to do. So use your imagination here. Use some of the things we've already discussed and learned in this class. You should be able to come up with 5 for each of these. If you have any questions, now your paper, all you need to do is submit a Word document to me with scenario 1, 2, and 3, and list your milestones and indicators for each one. That's all I need. You don't need to send me the entire exercise and explanation. If you have any questions or if you are unclear as to what the expectations are for this exercise, you need to let me know. Do not wait until the weekend. That'll end this tape.